Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today is just the measurements that we use in Luminarias and also the research that I am part of. And so I'm just going to go ahead and get started. So first I'm going to talk about how exactly the measures can be utilized in treatment, whether it be in or out of the therapy. And, it's really important to use screening tools with your clients because sometimes the client can't really formulate into words of what exactly they are feeling or what is going through their minds, or even sometimes they're too young to really explain uh, their anxiety they're feeling, or like what experiences they have lived through that can be perceived as traumatic to them. And in Luminarias, we use the GAD-7, which is the generalized anxiety disorder, the PHQ-9, which is a patient health questionnaire, the ACE, which is adverse childhood experiences, and we're also going to be using the CRIES, which is the Child Revised Impact of Effects Scale. And with these screening tools, you can properly measure perceived or elevated levels of anxiety, depression. You can measure traumatic experiences and their symptoms that these clients might be feeling or experiencing. And of course, all these assessments are available in Spanish, and just in case the client is bilingual or they prefer Spanish or anything like that. So first, the GAD-7 is a 7-question measure. It is derived from the DSM from generalized anxiety disorder, and really the symptoms that are needed to actually be diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. But one thing to keep in mind is that the GAD-7 is a screening tool, but it is not solely used just to diagnose. So yeah, you can use it to see okay, where the person is at in anxiety levels, but you can't just be like, oh, they scored really, really high, they definitely have GAD. Not really like that, but it could lead to conversations in the session of what exactly is making them feel so worried, or what worries exactly do they have? What are they afraid of happening? And there is a measuring score. So let me go back. As you can see, or as you probably guys know, there is a 0, 1, 2, 3 scale, 0 being not at all, 1 being several days, 2 being more than half the days, and 3 being nearly every day. And when you guys are finished going through all that with the client, you guys can score it. And depending on the score the person has, they can fall within a range of mild anxiety to severe anxiety. And while taking the GAD-7 with the client, going through it, it is important to know where exactly the client measures the highest, because that could lead to conversations or topics to talk about in session. Now, the PHQ-9, this one is also derived from the DSM, but for major depressive disorder. It is a 9-question measure, and it has the same scale as the GAD-7, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 0 being not at all, and 3 being nearly every day. And same with the GAD-7, this is not fully intended to be used just to diagnose. It is a screening tool. And the measuring score is very, very similar to the GAD-7, with the range from mild to severe depression. You just honestly just add it all up, add up all the scores and see where they land. But for the PHQ-9, it is very important to pay extra attention to question 9 and see where the client lands there or what they tell you. Because as you can see, number 9 is thoughts that you would be better off dead or of hurting yourself in some way. So you can also use that as like a suicide assessment or follow up with the suicide assessment for that. So that's something to keep in mind. And for the GAD-7, the PHQ-9, if you guys have already used it already with some of the clients, you'll notice that the questions are based off the last 2 weeks of that the client has experienced these types of symptoms or feelings. So they can be re-administered pretty often or up to the discretion of the therapist, depending how and when they want to use it. So it could be every month or every 2 months. Try not to let too much time between the two of them, but they could be used as like a tool to see how the progress is going in session. Is there any changes or any fluctuations? Did that 3 go down to a 1, or did that 0 go up to a 2? Like, those are things to keep in mind and notice them and see, like, okay, the client's anxiety is actually going down. Oh, but their depression level is going up. There must be something that happened between that time. So that's what I personally really liked about that, is they measure the last 2 weeks, so you can give them every so often. Now, the ACE is a little bit different than the PHQ-9 and the GAD-7, because the ACE is a simple yet super informative measure screening for trauma that the person might have experienced in their life. I say their life because this is a measure used used for the first 18 years of the person's life. Now, many, if not all of our clients are under 18. So what I usually say is, like, has any of these things ever happened in your entire life? Because most of them are like 9 or 13, just under 18. But the ACE measures a variety of perceived traumas, whether it be abuse, neglect, or witnessing abuse, family discord, and all of that. And it is on a yes or no basis. Yes, you enter a 1. No, you can leave it blank, or you can add a 0. And it is used to predict health outcomes in the future, of the person's future, based on like what their total score is. Now, this is not saying like, oh, they scored a 6, so like they're on a path of like really, becoming an addict or an abuser or being abused. No, this is just predictions. And another thing, just like the GAD-7 PHQ-9, where the person scores a yes could lead to conversations or topics to discuss. I know I have pulled stuff from the ACE with some of my clients, especially if it's like, number 8, which is, do you live with anyone who's a problem drinker, alcoholic, or uses street drugs? Or like number 4 is like, do you often feel like no one in your family loves you, or that you don't feel important or special? So that can lead to topics of neglect or just low self-esteem, feeling an outsider of the family. So we found these graphs based on the outcomes of the ACE scores. Like I said, these are just predictions, but there is like common themes that are visible. So as you can see, most of it, if it's like 4+, it could lead to adult alcoholism or chronic depression, suicide attempts, perpetrating domestic violence. So there is like a difference between genders somewhat, but just a nice visualization to see how the scores can be used. Now, this is the CRIES 8. It is a 8-question measure. And this one kind of dives a little bit deeper from the ACE, because the CRIES 8 is more measuring the symptomology that the person might feel or might be going through based on their perceived trauma that they have experienced. And some of the questions are very specific because the CRIES 8 is derived from PTSD, so post-traumatic stress disorder. And if you look at the DSM, there's usually like 4 categories of like symptoms, but the CRIES 8 really focuses more on the intrusion symptoms and the avoidance symptoms. And they're split evenly as like 4 questions are for intrusion and 4 questions are for avoidance. And one thing to note is that these questions are based on the last 7 days, so the last week. And the questions are super simple, and it was made for kids like 8 and older, that they can read it independently, they can answer it kind of like no problem. Like, I'm not sure if you guys have clients who are really, really young, but sometimes doing the ACE can be kind of tricky because there's just a lot of explanation because their reading level's not too high up yet. But yeah, so the CRIES 8 is based off symptomology of the trauma. And scoring the CRIES 8 is a little bit different than the GAD-7, PHQ-9, because instead of being just a simple 0, 1, 2, 3, this one goes by odd numbers. So it's 0, 1, 3, and 5. But just like the GAD-7, PHQ-9, you just add up all the numbers and just see where they're at. But the intrusion questions is questions 1, 3, 6, and 7. And the avoidance questions is 2, 4, 5, and 8. So they're not like in order, but super great. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more of like why specifically these measures and how they tie into the research that's being done. So what Ben Juarez and I are looking at is really focusing on the trauma that these kids are going through or have gone through. And I kind of already hinted at this, but the ACEs is just the overall perceived traumatic experiences or experience that the client is bringing in. But the CRIES 8 is diving into the symptomology of the traumatic event or events. So the current research is we are trying to validate the CRIES 8 because the CRIES 8 is validated in Europe, but not the United States. It has been, up to now, it has been only used for kids and adolescents that have gone through natural disasters or war. It's also been used in like Middle Eastern countries. But what Ben and I are trying to do is, well, one, validate it here in the United States, but also instead of focusing on like natural disasters and war, is children and adolescents who have experienced or are experiencing adversity. And adversity could be, poverty, community violence, any type of abuse, interpersonal problems, bullying, school violence, all of that can be counted as adversity. And to validate that, we're going to be cross-validating that with the ACEs, because the ACEs is a validated measure here in the United States, same as the GAD-7 and the PHQ-9. So our participants are going to be coming from all the schools that Luminarias has a collaboration with. So New NASA is the elementary school, Burt Corona has a middle and a high school here in like Pacoima, and Morks is the middle school in Koreatown, and then UNAS is in Pico Union. But because we're going from elementary to high school, all of our participants will be from TK, which is another version of like preschool, to 12th grade. And we will be looking at all the measures that it is, including the GAD-7, PHQ-9, the ACE, and the CRIES-8 as part of the study. And the study is specifically aiming for the Latinx community, so the children and adolescents that we work with, and also specifically in Southern California. So I'm not sure how often you looked at the research or dived into the research, but the Latinx community is highly underrepresented in the research overall. There is a little bit in like trauma and poverty and adversity, but it's still not enough. And the goal is, once the CRIES-8 is validated here in the United States, the data can be used to see, different types of treatment or specific treatments that can be used to help these kids or adolescents. And with your help, with all the interns here, we really hope to gather enough data to formulate all of this research and see how effective the CRIES-8 can be used in sessions or in treatment. And also adding in some social cultural parameters. These can be are you an immigrant, or what generation are you, first, second, third? What's your country of origin? What is your first language? Which language are you most comfortable with? So all that kind of stuff. And that will be added to the CRIES-8, so it could be really specific to the Latinx community and really form a more complete conceptualization of that client. Now, how will we be collecting this data? That's where all the interns come in and submitting it for record keeping, and then we will sort through all of that. So access to all of the screening tools are available in everyone through Dropbox. You can find them in the little folder of Luminaria's intake paperwork. Both English and Spanish are uploaded there, and they are uploaded as PDFs. So how I've used the screening tools with some of my clients now that we're kind of virtual is I just have the PDF open, I share my screen, and whatever number the client tells me, I just highlight the number, which is pretty easy, and then save it and all of that. But one really, really important thing for these screening tools is to not put any major identifying information of your client on there, because that will be kind of breaking confidentiality. So don't put their entire name or something like that. What you could put, and what we're asking for you guys to put on the PDFs, is just their initials, their age. Their birthday's not important, just their age, and the score, the total score that they ranked in the measure. But that's it, just initials, age, and their score. Nothing else. And then Ben and I will sort through all that. So there's just some visualizations, just see the ACE, the CRIES-8, the GAD-7, PHQ-9 are together. So they're all in there. You guys can find it and just download it. It's really simple. And then you will upload it to that client's folder. So we have folders for each of our clients where we upload the weekly notes. Just upload the assessments there. And then That's really it. Are there any questions based off anything I said, or any confusions or concerns?
Just one question. This is Dr. Cardenas. With regard to with regard to the, you mentioned the population that you're gathering data on. We also have the adults that we're gathering from LAMC, LA Mission College. Is that data going to be used as a part of the research, or that's a separate pod?
Well, as of now, they won't, because we're just focusing on kids and adolescents. So they have to be 18 years and younger.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And that is what we have approved through the IRB.
We're going to get it. Well, just so you know, we're going to be gathering it anyway, and maybe that'll be something that we do on our own then, okay? Since we'll have that data.
Yeah, and that could also be used as like a follow-up, but for right now, the study is focused more on children and adolescents.
Okay, great. All right. Well, okay. And just for regard to the, even though we're going to be continuing to do it here in Luminarias ongoing, what's the time frame, or what's the dates that you're going to be gathering, just to you know, to make your first data gathering set, you know, for the research project?
As soon as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, as soon as possible.
But like, let's say till December, till next June, you have an idea of tentative?
Tentative. Well, for the initial like startup of the project, we want to get that data by the end of September.
Okay.
And then, but we'll still be continuing gathering data, but we want more like a solid number by the end of September.
Okay, yeah, so we need to just get this done as soon as possible in the intake process. And all right, so that's just, again, thanks. I think you did a great job, Jaylene. Of course, you and Ben and Dr. Martinez, I'm sure, massaging these slides. But very understandable. I think it's going to really help out our incoming people have an idea of, one, how to use it, and then how it's unique, because is there anybody else doing this in the country?
Not that we found. Like the CRISE-8 hasn't really been researched in the United States. It's mostly just been Europe, Middle East, and I think like one country in Asia, like Bangladesh, I think it was.
Okay. Yeah, so this is very groundbreaking, I think, and necessary, and it just goes to show how much more data needs to be gathered in a lot of different areas with the, like you call the Latinx population. It's always been here, and I'm glad we're doing it here in Southern California, because we tend to get data and things to work with our Latino population. It's based on New York and Boston and Florida. And if you've ever been to any of those places, you know it's a little different population actually than here. So I think it's really great. Okay, so thanks a lot. So you guys, let's get back to our regular supervision then, all right? Thanks.
Thank you. I'll stop sharing now.
Yeah. All right, we can get back on our cameras now. All right, so we have about 30 minutes left. Now that you guys, the taping is done. Any comments, you guys? Any feedback for Jaylene? Not questions, but feedback?
I mean, I just wanted to say that it looks like it's really helpful, and it's more information. And I was kind of hesitant because I wasn't sure how to use some of these, but the presentation really helped. So thank you.
Yeah.
It helped explain it too.
Yeah. So what really I think is helpful is that being able to see that, you see how people are like, why do we give this? Because you have your score, right, that day. Like, let's say you gave it today, but then you're meeting with them tomorrow or